Good evening, Mayor, Board of Aldermen. In your packet was a memo from myself to the board, a copy to Mahesh on the Willow Avenue alternatives. We looked at three alternatives that we think that were available to us at this particular time. The first alternative that we covered would be changing the one-way designation from one-way north to one-way south. Would basically be changing the direction of the street, which would then allow, would address the issue that was presented many times, was they did not like turning left onto Raytown Road from the side streets. By changing it to southbound, they would be able to continue south on Willow, and then when they're coming back north through the area, they would still go to Raytown Road, but instead of making a left-hand turn, they would be making a right-hand turn. That would limit the ability to utilize Willow as an alternative in an emergency situation if there was a traffic accident at Raytown Road and Gregory and needed to have a temporary detour while an accident scene was investigated and cleaned. They would have to utilize a detour area to the west of Raytown Road. That would then be making that left-hand turn. However, that left-hand turn would not be a guaranteed item, whereas the people who are currently now wanting to travel south, if they want to travel south and not use Raytown Road, that left-hand turn is guaranteed every time. So that's the first alternative that we looked at. Wouldn't take much staff time to change the signs, but it would require a change of the ordinance that is currently in place at the time to change the designation from one-way north to one-way south. The second alternative that we looked at would to be provide a complete widening of Willow to a minimum width that we feel would be comfortable, which would be 18 feet wide, which is still a fairly narrow road. Then we would have 2 foot of kind of a drainage curb on each side of the street, would get us to 22 feet. That would also require the acquisition of some right-of-way on the northern portion of the roadway from 10401 70th Terrace. This is the gentleman with the large rocks in the yard if you've been through the area. That cost, however, is pretty prohibitive at $196,700, and we would not be able to accomplish that this year. The third alternative that we looked at is somewhat of a variation of the suggestion of having a yield sign at each end of Willow Avenue. Willow Avenue is approximately 700 feet long, and to place a yield at each end, I just don't think is a feasible alternative. People wouldn't be able to see before they entered the road, and they wouldn't be able to make eye contact and determine, okay, who's going, who's not, when is it my turn, when is it not my turn. To address that, what we propose is constructing 3 maneuvering areas along Willow, 1 for northbound, 2 for southbound traffic, and then control it with yield signs at those particular maneuvering areas. At those maneuvering areas, that would allow one person who has to yield to pull over and allow the other direction of traffic to pass by their vehicle in that area. That always seems to be the biggest concern, is where do we let somebody pass in those areas, because it's only 11.5 feet wide. Currently, the only way to let somebody pass is to physically pull over into somebody's yard or into a gravel area that somebody uses for some parking at this current time. This option, we've budgeted at almost $8,800. That includes some funds for right-of-way acquisition. We would still need acquisition from the same gentleman with those rocks in the yard to try to get some of that area so we could have a maneuvering area. The maneuvering area would be about 40 foot long, enough for car or passenger truck to pull into that area to allow the other one to pass and then proceed on if there wasn't any other oncoming traffic at that particular area. I don't believe we'd be able to accomplish this year unless we get very cooperative weather for the construction season to go out there and construct the passing areas, especially considering that we would need to acquire some additional right-of-way in that area. So that is much more reasonable in cost. The timing would be the biggest delay in this project. It's just being able to acquire the right-of-way, and then once we did acquire that additional right-of-way, we need to provide those 3 items. And the reason we did 3 areas was we want to limit that length from the yield to yield sign of, we don't want it any further than 200 feet. That way it's not, it's a short enough distance that we think people would be able to negotiate that area and understand what is expected of them in that area. So maybe on the first trip it might be confusing, but I don't anticipate that there's a lot of just random traffic through this area. So with those items, we also did a traffic study in the area that includes counts and speeds that are going through the area. Currently, we recorded in a 5-day period a maximum of 95 vehicles a day. 15 during any particular hour was the maximum hourly traffic. There were some vehicles that were not recognizing the one-way designation at this point and were continuing to travel south. That was about 4 or 5, maybe as much as 15 during an entire day that were not adhering to that one-way designation. So right at this current time, my recommendation to address the citizen concerns would be to change the designation to one-way south while we pursue alternative 3 to provide maneuvering areas along Willow Avenue. Here to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Kramer.
And this would probably be a question for our police department. What is their feeling on a situation like that with, say we had a traffic accident on Raytown Road with directing traffic back that other way? What's their thought on that?
When we talked, the basic understanding is we can deal with the issue in the short term. I think they would prefer to have the two-way traffic in that area. So for the short term, I think they would be able to work with the southbound designation. And then, but they would definitely prefer a two-way designation.
My other thought, and of course I drove down that road before, have we considered doing like no parking along the street to help resolve that issue? I know that a couple times that I've been down there, there's been cars parked on the side of the road, and when you've got somebody coming down and you've got to actually physically get over in somebody's yard, and there's a car obstructing the way, it's potential for an accident. And didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
That's something we have considered, but right now we were concentrating on what are our alternatives for a one-way versus two-way traffic. And I think that really needs to be part after we determine which path we want to take. I think no parking in there is warranted because there's just simply not enough room along the roadway either. So
right.
It really needs to be no parking, but then it's just as some of the neighbors don't have anywhere else to have limited parking as they do on other areas. So
well, and I think widening the road is not really a good alternative basically for budget costs. And then one of the houses, if you widen the road and go up into their yard, you're
very close.
15 feet from the front of their house. So I really don't see that as an option, but I would support changing the direction at this point and doing a further study.
Mr. Azier.
After my discussion a week ago with Andy Knoll regarding the three proposals, I did have a chance to visit with some of the people within the neighborhood and explain to them what was going to be brought forth eventually. And they still remain adamant that they would like to see it two-way. They did not feel that to commit almost $200,000 to the budget to widen it was necessary. They really liked the proposal because it kind of fit with their original proposal of the three destination areas that would allow people to pull over. And since we did pass a transportation tax not too long ago, designated to projects like this, it seemed to fall within the scope of what we could do. So I guess my recommendation would be maybe to postpone discussion of this item until our next meeting to give the neighborhood a chance to come, because actually, normally when we have the mayor's report and then we have the city administrator's report, we don't have discussion. So, and I do thank the mayor for giving us this opportunity, but it would allow the neighborhood to come and voice their opinion. I do think it's interesting that according to the traffic study that there are about 21 people a day that simply ignore the one-way traffic as it is, and still use it as two-way, and they still haven't had accidents there. But that would be my recommendation, to give the neighborhood a chance to come back and address the Board of Aldermen again.
Mr. Hamel.
Excuse me. I would support that. The few emails and conversations that I've had with constituents who are involved and drive up and down Willow really keep asking me, why do we need to change it in the first place? It was fine as it was. Let's put it back to a two-way street and move on to more important issues. It was one of the comments I received today in an email. So I would support Mr. Azier's suggestion that we consider this further and keep in mind hearing from the public, which I think totally supports putting it back like it was and leaving it alone. Thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Knoll? So I understand what you gentlemen are asking for. You'd like to delay this at least until the next meeting to counsel further with your constituents on this matter?
Yes, and to let them know that if they want to come and speak on this matter at the same meeting, that would be an opportunity for them to revoice their concerns.
Right, and I think that in my discussion with Mahesh is that they're eventually looking from direction from this board, which of the three that we choose from. So unless, I strongly feel that we need to invite the public to participate before we make that recommendation.
We've had a number of citizens talk about it already. So during this next 2 weeks, will the two of you then be counseling with your peers on the board to gain that support and direction? So at the next meeting we can say this is what we want to do and move on with this topic?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's great. Anything else to add, Andy?
I think what we were really looking forward was when we brought it back before the board was just trying to get that input of here's some alternatives, which one would you want us to pursue, so that at the next meeting, we could bring forward an appropriate ordinance that matches the board's wishes and goals.
I think that what you heard tonight is they want to counsel some more with their constituents before that recommendation is made. Mr. Mock? Mr. Kramer?
One thought that just came to my mind, when we do the study, whether we do the yield lanes or whatever we do, I'd like to see a cost study on putting a flashing yellow light that says something about yield to oncoming traffic or something like that at the end of each street. That way it would warn somebody that has not been down that street previously the potential for a problem like that.
I can tell you that one pretty much off the top of my head. Each light would require setting a meter, which will cost us about $15 to $19 a month for each location. So we spend about $40 at each location just in electricity on an ongoing basis. So I will add the fixed fees of setting the equipment and from there, but I do know the ongoing costs quickly pile up fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mock now?
Yeah. While we're there, how much would it cost to go southbound? I see that's the only one that wasn't highlighted in here is how much it would cost.
I did not include staff time to go out and change the signs. We would simply utilize the existing signs that we have. So it would be staff time to pull down the signs, relocate them, and change the directions. So it'd probably take us about 2 hours to go take the signs down, get locates, make sure we're not placing a sign pole in a utility and damage one of those. But
So you change of ordinance also?
yes, we would have to change the ordinance as well.
Okay, you got cost there. It would help out if, I think there's a few more costs too, if you'd come back with the cost if the neighborhood does come back, to let them know that also on the cost to go southbound.
Okay.
Okay?
Mr. Ertz?
Well, I appreciate that these solutions solve the problem in the fact that this came before us originally because people were driving off the road from, I assume, from some of the residents on the street, and it looks like this would be a feasible plan that they could stop the, like we heard one person saying somebody was parked on their grass waiting for a bus and things like that. So I think we still need to solve the problem, and I think some of the one that you put forward and recommended sounds good, and I look forward to hearing what Alderman Asia and Alderman Hamilton bring back from their neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Kramer again.
Yeah, with that in mind, and I think, we've heard what the constituents have said about wanting to change the direction of the traffic in the meantime while we do this study and determine what we're going to do. So I would go ahead and make a motion to change the direction of the one-way street at this time and come back and give us further study options.
Point of order. Point of order. I think that was done by ordinance. That requires 2 readings. So you'd have to ask an ordinance tonight, have it drawn up, and then suspend the rules and do it again to get that passed tonight. There's no need to do that.
Mr. Willow, do you concur?
Yes, it was my previous report to the Alderman that this was passed by ordinance and will need to be undone by ordinance if you so elect to choose it. So you could direct the staff to bring back you an ordinance at your next meeting if you're ready to move ahead now. But we can't by motion tonight change the direction of the street. You recommend to the staff to bring back an appropriate ordinance.
You desire to restate the motion, Mr. Kramer? I just withdraw the motion. Okay. All right, I just hope we don't get mired down with paralysis by analysis on this. We've heard our citizens. They've been very patient with us. Please make sure that Mr. Knoll knows what it is that you're asking. Please do our homework and be ready for the next meeting, and we can put this to rest, hopefully. Mr. Sharma, anything else on communication from the city administrator?
No, sir, that concludes the report.
Okay, very good. We'll move to committee reports. Ms. Melson on finance.
Yes, we did have a finance meeting today. We met at 6 o'clock. Our next meeting will be October 26th here in council chambers at 6 o'clock. The committee of the whole has met on the 2010-11 budget, hearing all the presentations from the departments, and an overview of that budget will be given this evening by Mr. Sharma and Mr. Wilmoth.
Ms. White on municipal.
Municipal should be meeting, next week at 7, I believe.
Mr. Mock.
Yeah, Council on the Aging will be having their fall forum on October 15th from 9 o'clock to 11:30.
Mr. Pardue.
The Human Relations Commission will be meeting on October 21st at 6.
Any other committee reports? Very good. We'll now move to the study session. We've got the fiscal year 2010-2011 budget presentation to be made by Jeremy Wilmoth, our finance director. Jeremy, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor Bauer and Board of Aldermen. I'm pleased to introduce to you budget of 2010-2011 for the city of Raytown. Tonight's presentation will be in 2 parts. Part 1, Jeremy Wilmoth will be presenting the detail of the budget, and then I will follow up with the part 2 with the overall view of the city's budget. So at this time, I'll give microphone